I know a lot of people have issues with the salary question in job interviews. They also have issues with the whole concept of compensation. Starting from the job ad, actually, you look at a job posting and usually you don't see the compensation on the job ad. Now, depending where you are in the world, there's some legislation in various regions, a minority of regions, that say employers have to put the salary range on the job posting, right? Now, listen, if you're in government is a special case where things are official, things are open, you can look up everybody's compensation, that's in every government job, things like this, and that's usually common. So it works a little bit different in government than it does everywhere else. So if you're not in government, you're in the private sector, and you're going for a private sector job, basically a job that is not in government, and it's not in a charity, depending where you are in the world, as I said, usually there won't be a salary range posted. Now, even if there is a salary range, this is the thing. There's no guarantee that that salary range is accurate, because how do you prove conclusively in a court of law that an employer couldn't have paid more if they'd wanted to? You know what I mean? That's a very slippery thing, very hard thing to prove, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, like with documentation and evidence and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty hard to do that. Usually when jobs are created, they're created by a hiring manager, some type of manager, and they have an idea of what they're willing to pay. But it's far from scientific, and it's far from conclusive, and they can always change their mind. You know what I mean? So if you're in a region where you have to post a pay range, you can just sort of give a pay range, but there's no guarantee that that's strictly accurate. So even if there's a pay range posted, this is my point, you can't always go off that. You can't always go off thinking okay, that's their upper limit and this is their lower limit, right? We'd like to think that, a lot of candidates would like to think that, but that's just, unfortunately, it's not accurate. So you're really stuck in the same position, as you've always been as a candidate, which is that you are flying blind. You don't know what they're prepared to pay, what they're capable of paying, all the constraints they're under. You don't know that stuff. So it's just whether or not there's a legislation to post the range publicly or not, you're in the same boat. That's what I'm trying to say. And the thing is that how can I put this? The employer has a vested interest in you not knowing its upper and lower limits, right? It's like any negotiation. You have a vested interest in not showing your adversary your cards, right? They don't want to know. You don't want them to know how high you'd be prepared to go, like in an auction. If you knew that, they would be able to outmaneuver you, right? Like if you tried to negotiate, you wanted to buy a car and you were negotiating with a car salesperson and you're haggling over price. Imagine if that car salesperson knew exactly how high you would be prepared to go. And you know what I mean? That would completely undermine you. Because they would just, if they knew that you could go up to say 50,000 or something, they would hold out, You say, well, I'll only take it for 30. And they go, yeah, I know that's a bluff. And then you say, okay, fine, 40,000, but that's my final offer. And they go, yeah, it's a bluff, right? They hold out for 49.9 or something like that. You know what I mean? It would be ridiculous. It would be over before it began. So for that reason, employers don't want you to know their range, and you don't want them to know your range, how low you would go. If they knew that you would still take this job for 20, right? But you're saying, well, I'm going to need 30 to take this job. Right? There's no negotiation, right? So the essence of negotiation is sort of hiding your limits from your adversary. Without that, there is no negotiation, right? So that's kind of the first thing there is to know. The second thing is to know that negotiation comes from options. Negotiation is not persuasion, because maybe you're dealing with a reasonable person, maybe you're not. But at the end of the day, they can always just play hardball and just say, nope, not agreed to, absolutely not. This is what the job pays, take it or leave it, and I need to know in the next hour. Like they can always do that to you, right? So if you want the job, you have no choice but to accept whatever they're prepared to pay, right? Because they have other options. They have other candidates that have applied for the job. This gives them a position of power. They don't need you. They have other candidates that have also applied that are most likely qualified. So they have other options. The question is, they would like you, but if you play real hardball, then they may just say, you know what, forget it, and then they offer it to someone else, right? So they have multiple options. You don't. So the power in negotiation comes from having options. So imagine if you had several job offers lined up. Imagine like this was like a perfect hypothetical world where you had like several people offering you a job. There was a joke from The Simpsons. I don't know if anyone watches The Simpsons anymore, where the guy walks down the street, and someone pulls up in a car right next to him as he's walking down the sidewalk, and offers him a job. And he says, "What's wrong with this country? Can a man just walk down the street without someone offering him a job?" Imagine that you lived in that perfect world, okay? And you had 5 job offers on the table, including for some jobs that were paying more than this one, okay? That would put you in a real position of power, because at the end of the day, you could tell this employer, "No, I need this. And if you can't give me that, sorry, no dice." And you would stick to that. And even if they called your bluff, you'd be able to just walk away, right? You say, "I need 50." And they say, "Well, I'm sorry, the job pays 42. So, here's our offer for 42. Let me know when you can sign that." Right? And you say, "Okay, I'll let you know. Never. Goodbye." Right? You can, and maybe that's a bluff. You're calling their bluff. You could do that because you have other options, including maybe some jobs that might even pay you more. Why would you take this one instead? Because this one is more desirable. That job is maybe shift work, or, you have to relocate or something. You'd like to take this one, but you have other options, right? So that's where the power of negotiation comes from. It's by having other options. If you don't have any other options, your only other option is unemployment. You either have no job or you take this, and those are your only 2 options. Then you don't have a lot of power. You're kind of, you can always say, "No, I refuse. I'd rather be unemployed." But that's not really a great option. It's not a great alternative. So if that's your situation, you don't have a lot of power. You pretty much have to accept whatever they are willing to give you, right? So that's the second point I want to make. Negotiation is about having alternative options, okay? If you have no alternative options, you don't have any real power. If you go out and get yourself a lot of alternative options, even things that are almost alternative options, like you don't have any other job offers, from other companies right now, but you've got lots and lots of job interviews lined up into the next several weeks. You've got 2 or 3 interviews per week for the next 3 weeks. So if these people play hardball, it's like, okay, well, I'm expecting another offer to come along relatively soon. So I'm not going to accept a really crappy arrangement because I most likely will have another offer, hopefully soon. Does that make sense? So that's the other point I want to make. Okay, I'm going to take a quick question in the middle of this. Nuno says, say I applied to a job and they gave a wide range. Okay, so this is what they're offering, 100,000 to 150,000. Is it wise to target the middle spot, 125,000, to be more competitive against others? How do you know if you're being competitive against others? You see, for all you know, that range is a lie, and there are no other applicants, and you're the only qualified person. The range is what they want you to think the range is, just so you know, just being technical here. Okay? Now, listen, your value is not determined by what range they happen to say. Your value is determined by how much people are, if you see what I'm saying, how much people are prepared to pay you. Okay? Is it wise to target the middle spot to be more competitive against others? No. If I gave that, could I negotiate if given an offer? Well, okay, so here's the thing, Nuno. It seems like you're flying completely blind here. Are you competing against other people? Do they have any other contenders? Like, let me ask you a question, okay? If they gave you this range, 100 to 150, okay, and you're worried, you don't want to say, I need 150, right? Why is that? It's some imagined thing where you're imagining there might be other people. Surely there's other candidates that are my competition that would work for less than 150, right? You see, technically, let's go back for a second. Why is there a range? Why doesn't a job just simply pay a value, right? Like, why are they giving you a range and saying, well, we could pay you 150 or we could pay you 100, right? What's the point of doing that, right? If they could get a person for 100, why would they consider paying another person 150? Let me ask you that. Well, it's because you're going to get a person that's more valuable, that's more productive, right? Who has more potential, right? So the question is, if that's the case, why are you worth 125? Why are you not worth 150? Okay? Now, here's the answer. I'm asking all these questions to try and make you think. Here are the answers, okay? Now, the reality is that you don't know the answer to these questions because you have no data, okay? It could turn out that they're perfectly prepared to pay you $150,000 and you're going to undercut yourself by going up and saying, oh, I'll take 125. You could have gotten 150 as it turned out, right? Or it could be the opposite, right? It turns out that you've got several competitors for this. They're all more qualified than you. They're more experienced than you. They're better regarded than you, but you are their cheap option. They think that they might be able to get you for 100. So if you walk in there and say 125, you've just eliminated yourself, right? You don't know what you're walking into, okay? Because you have no information. Now, here's how you improve your odds, okay? You need to find out how much you're actually worth, okay? According to this, you could be worth 100 or you could be worth 150. You don't seem to know what you're worth, okay? This is how you find out. You get competing offers from other companies, okay? You have other options. So if you say, I'm going to need 125, and they say, sorry, we were thinking like 102 actually, and maybe 104, but that's it, right? So I'm sorry, 125, too rich for my blood, no dice. Let's offer it to the next candidate, right? You know what I mean? If you have another company that's willing to pay you 160, right? That clearly shows that you're worth 160. These people have said you're worth 100. That's what this means. If they've given you an offer for a job that the range is between 100 and 150, that's conclusive evidence that you are worth 100, okay? No one can tell you you are not worth 100,000 because you've got an offer. Someone is willing to step up and pay you at least 100, right? Okay, so if you get another offer for 160, that tends to conclude that that's evidence that you are worth 160, in which case you could go back to these people and you could say, look, 150 is all? Okay, I suppose I'll have to make 150 work for me. I'm going to need 150. And if they laugh and say, oh, I'm sorry, we were thinking of 102, you say, okay, not a problem. I appreciate your candor. Goodbye. And then you go take the job for 160, right? Right? So without any other options, you don't know what you're worth beyond the fact that you're worth at least 100. And you have no bargaining power in this. You could start it at 125, but if you stick to your guns at 125, you could wind up with nothing, right? It's a risk. So it's basically uncertainty. There's no way of knowing if 125 will work. If you wanted to really play it safe, if it's a choice between this and unemployment, and you really need a job, what you would do in this case is say like, okay, 102 works for me, something like that, and then maybe get like, you could try and push. What I would do if I personally were in that situation and I really needed this job, what I would do is I'd give a low offer, somewhere closer to 100, but I would make a bit of a show of it during the negotiation. I'd say like, well, I'm used to getting more, but you know what? I really want to work here. I don't mind starting off with like 102 or something like that. But if you could give me a break on days of vacation, sick days, any perks, any benefits in there, if like things like sick days and vacation days are very easy for them usually to grant. So they could say, okay, you're starting for low money, but we'll give you at least this. We'll sweeten the deal with that. So I wouldn't haggle on the money, but maybe I'd say like, instead of 2 weeks vacation or whatever it is, you give me 4, we got a deal. Something like that. 102, there you go. Right? If you really needed it. If you could afford to take a bit of risk, I would say 125. If you could afford to take more risk, I would say 140. There's no way of knowing if any of these are going to work because you have no evidence on any of this. Does that make sense? That's how this kind of works. Nuno says, all good points, thanks. Remote work in different locations, they require different amounts of cost of living, higher demand. Yeah, there's all kinds of factors, right? There's all kinds of variables that you would then factor in, right? If you have to relocate or you're moving to some place with a higher cost of living. All of that comes later, but like I'm talking about like sort of in a perfect world, where would you start from? Okay, but what I would do, Nuno, like what a thing you could do if you felt so inclined, if you really wanted to put in some extra work to have it pay off later, would be to find out more precisely than this, how much you're actually worth. If there's a big difference between 100 and 150, right? If you don't know where in that you are, right? Go and get some evidence on that. Go and get other alternatives. And then one way or another, you will walk away with like a much better paying job. Does that make sense? Amazed says, maybe unrelated. Recruiters sometimes randomly contact me for opportunities via LinkedIn. They ghost me. This is annoying. Okay, well, let's keep this to salary negotiation. Okay, let's get back to just salary negotiation concept. So we've talked about having alternatives. Alternatives, options is what gives you power in a negotiation, okay? Negotiation is not persuasion. It's not like weird tactics to try and make someone think more favorably about you. That's not what negotiation is. Certainly you can employ those, if you want, but at the end of the day, people can just ignore all that. They can say, nope, I understand that you're being reasonable. I understand that, it's a very reasonable request, but sorry, I'm going to need this. Whether you're or not, that seems reasonable to you. I don't care. I'm going to need that if you want me to do this. Right? So they can always just play hardball with you. Negotiation is about navigating that, right? And in a lot of business discussions, it goes beyond, persuading people. It's simply, I'm going to get whatever I can get. It's just that simple. Just like these people are doing to you. And I know it's hypothetical. I know that's what you said. I'm just responding to that. Okay? So, negotiation is not about persuading somebody, about trying to explain, make a very logical sounding case to them, very persuasive case, because at the end of the day, they'll probably just ignore that when money is at stake and just say, I'm sorry, I need this high amount of money. And I'm not even going to entertain that kind of communication with you. The way it works is we pay this. Let me know when you can sign the contract. It's just as simple as that. What do we cover under this? We cover traditionally the question, what are your salary expectations in job interviews? That's what people seem to want me to talk about. Very simple. It's not this, I know a lot of people fear that question. It's really not that big of a deal. The simple thing you do is you try your damnedest not to give a number. And you shouldn't give a number, no matter what they say, right? If you're speaking with a person, either on the phone or in a job interview, there's no reason why you should give a number when they demand that you do. They'll probably say everything under the sun to try and persuade you to give them a number. We need to know, and your position is simply, sorry, I know relatively little about this job right now. It's not possible for me to give you a number that's meaningful because I don't know what I'm getting into, I don't know the conditions of work. I don't know what the benefits are, what the compensation is, if it's going to be remote work. I don't know if I'm going to relocate. I don't know what the hours are. I don't know if there's mandatory overtime. I don't know if it's shift work. I don't know if it's seasonal. I don't know if I'm going to work holidays, blah, 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 blah. I don't know any of that stuff. So how can I give you a number, right? Now, you would say this in a very polite way. You just say, I'm very sorry. At this point, early in this process, I don't know enough to be able to comfortably give you a meaningful number, right? So that's like your first sort of thing you do whenever they ask you, what are your salary requirements? If they ask you, how much money did you make previously in your current position or your previous position, you don't disclose. You say, I'm sorry, that's personal confidential information. I have a personal policy of not disclosing that. There are privacy issues, confidentiality issues. I'm sure you understand, right? So you never give that out. Because what they're going to do is they're going to take the amount of money you're making now and say that and assume that that's what you're worth, right? What if you're a student doing a summer job painting houses or something, but you're graduating with a degree in, I don't know, medicine, whatever? Are they going to say like, okay, well, you made this much per hour painting houses, therefore that's what you're worth now that you've got a medical degree? It's like, no, it's idiotic. It's all based on silly assumptions, right? It's all extremely flimsy, right? You don't answer the question, what is your current salary? Never answer that. The trick is to give a very polite, professional response that essentially says, no, I'm not going to tell you, right? Without creating a ton of awkwardness and ruining any kind of good relationship you might be building with these people, right? Then when they say, what are your salary expectations? If it's very early in the process, meaning if it's before any kind of offer, you never give a number. Because the moment you give a number, you lose. Either it's too high and you've just eliminated yourself by asking for too much money, or it's too low and you could have gotten 50, but you just said 25, so they're going to offer you 25. So you just, you lowballed yourself, right? So you lose. You could have been making 50, and now you're making 25 because you said the wrong thing, right? I know that's obviously an exaggeration, but you take my point, right? So the moment you give a number, you lose. Now, one thing you can do is you can give a range, but once again, the range you give is tantamount to not giving a number, because the way you would do it, okay, let me back up. The second thing you would do is you'd say, like, you'd ask them for a range. They say, what are your salary requirements? And you say, well, can I ask, what is the range for this position? Now, if they'll tell you, you say, well, that's fine with me. Somewhere in there would be fine. There you go. My answer is a range. If they don't want to tell you, then you can give them a range, but it's meaningless, because I would recommend you give them a range that's very low to very high. Now, the low number and the high number are still, they're not ridiculous. They're still technically possible. They're feasible, but it's a real stretch, right? So you're going to be giving them a wide range. So essentially it amounts to not giving a number, right? Now, why would you do this? It's because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you give them a wide range, you say anywhere between 20 and, 60, somewhere in there, I'm sure, will probably work out just fine, right? And it is not ridiculous because some people do start that job for 20, and it has been known that some people can make 60, right? So you're not giving ridiculous numbers. You're giving like, the full range. You say somewhere in there, I'm sure will work for me. The reason why that works at this point is because they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much money. You didn't give like an extremely high number. You said anywhere from 20 all the way to 60, somewhere in there, right? But yet it leaves you open to ask for more money later on as you learn about the job. It's like, you're not committing to 20. You said anywhere between 20 and 60, right? So it's another non-answer, right? The entire purpose of this is to not discuss money until you get an offer. That's the only time you want to discuss money or compensation, is when you get an offer. You have no power to negotiate before the offer stage, because if you ask for too much, they'll just eliminate you and go with the next candidate. You have absolutely no power, right? What you want is you want to get to the end of the process where they've fallen in love with you, they see your value, they've decided, look, of all the people we've talked to, we want that person, right? So then they've taken the trouble to write you an offer, get it to you. The recruiter, if there's a recruiter in the process, they've sort of stuck their neck out and said, I recommend this person. I think you should go with them. The hiring manager said, okay, yep, I like that person too. I would like them. They're starting to imagine you in the role. They want you in the role. As far as they're concerned, it's as good as done. They've picked their person. They just assume you're going to accept, right? And then they send it to you. And if there's a chance that you could say, sorry guys, this doesn't work for me, then it's painful. First of all, the recruiter is embarrassed. They recommended you. They're supposed to be the expert, and you like threw it back in their face. It's very embarrassing. They don't want that to happen, right? That's when they're more inclined to like, okay, you want this much money? Okay, fine. Here you go. Here's your money. Can we get this rolling, right? The hiring manager, they've already finished their search. They've decided on you. Now, if you refuse or you don't work out, it's like they've got to go back and revisit this task, right? In your job at work, have you ever done that where like, you've got different duties and different tasks you got to do, and some of them are big, and then you complete one, maybe on a Friday, and you're like, good, you feel good about yourself. Put that baby to bed, right? And then on Monday, it comes back, I thought that was done. Turns out we've got to get back into it and redo it. Is that a good feeling? No, that's painful, right? So if you could just make that go away by saying, fine, just whatever, just pay them the extra $5,000. Who cares? You'll do it, right? So that's where you have a little bit of power at the offer stage, okay? Because if you say no, it causes them pain. It delays the process, causes embarrassment, causes disappointment, and it's like, why? Why? Because you're holding out for another little, certain amount of money. Whatever, just pay them. The boss is probably thinking like, look, I've sat in so many job interviews, over the last couple of weeks, like just my time alone is worth more than that, whatever, pay them that money. Let's get on with this, right? So that's where you start to have a little bit of power, okay, in the offer stage. That's why you don't want to negotiate compensation before the offer stage. You can't. You have no power, okay? So the other power you have, possibly, is the power to draw out the process a little bit longer than what they would have liked. They give you an offer, you say, no, maybe we could do this, and then they give you a counter offer, and then, it goes back and forth. It's lengthening the process. They don't like that. That's work for them. It's delaying the start of the new employee, right? It's painful for them. So it's little things like this that start to give you a little bit of bargaining power. That's why you want to negotiate at that stage if you're going to negotiate at all.